Racism is like a loaded gun, triggered sometimes deliberately, sometimes randomly, but always effectively, leaving destruction behind. It stalks institutions that make it impossible for people to compete fairly. It stalks society which will not accept what is different. Sickly, it is even programmed into children who parrot programmed beliefs. What is its root in our country whose history still stalks us? A history of invasion, dispossession, pain and division, and a promise of true democracy and the experience of real freedom. It's like we're all standing outside Babel, speaking in different tongues, unheard, not understood by each other. And tonight we hope to find a way that lily pads us out of shouting and finger pointing, onto a plateau of understanding, reason, and a pathway to justice. Too much expectation for 30 minutes perhaps, but we must try, because our country depends on it, because our lives depend on it. Good evening, I'm Madam Speaker, and tonight we ask, can South Africa be exorcised of racism? My guests are social analyst and researcher Tessa Dooms, Ernst Roots from Lobby Group, from Afrikaner Rights Group AfriForum, our jury, social justice activist and founder and director of LNS L&N Advisors, Loveland in Wadei, Professor Melissa Steyn from the Wit Centre of Diversity Studies, from the Kasrada Foundation, Busisiwe Nkosi, and from the Institute of Race Relations, Gabriel Kraus. I want to thank all of you for being with us here tonight, and there's only one rule: tear up your speeches and keep it straight to the point. Racism in our country has an adventitious root system, nourished by a history not fully told, in a present that is still maladjusted. It can only be uprooted by justice. Tessa, let's put the first question to you. How do you define racism in South Africa?
So racism isn't just about being able to categorize people by race. So it's about systems that say this is what this race means, and this is how we're going to treat someone based on their race. And so racism starts with the fact that we decide what race is, we decide what it means, we give meaning to it, and racism is about that prejudice that we put to it. So when we say that we see somebody who's black and we say that signifies that they are different, that they are not to be treated with respect, that they are not to be given dignity, and we say that other people have the right to treat them differently, and that's when we say that's racism. So it's not just about saying race, and that's what people usually say, oh, you're saying somebody is black, you're racist. No, it's about what we connote to it.
Ernst, how do you define racism in our country today?
Well, I would say that there are as many definitions for racism as there are political commentators. Racism, everyone would have their own definition, but broadly speaking, it's harboring views about another race, views of hatred or views of you regard a particular race inferior, or you have some sort of reason to hate them or to feel that you need to discriminate them against such race or people of that race. And then you usually identify that when people act on it. And I think that's basically what racism is.
So if it is as simple to understand as the pair of you are defining, why do you think it is that our views collide so in such an incendiary way and sometimes tragic way in South Africa, Tessa? Because
race is about who has power and who uses that power against others. And so it's not just, you know, we're not just talking about something that's in the abstract. We're talking about something that affects people's lives, affects their identities, affects their economics. It affects so many things about them. And the worst thing about racism is that racism is often seen in its institutional forms. And so it's not that judgment becomes an institution. It becomes something that governs society. And so people feel powerless against it. And so they see that they're being treated differently, they're being oppressed, they're being marginalized on the basis of race. But it's an entire system that's doing it to them. And so it is violent and it's oppressive.
Do you accept that definition?
No, I don't think racism is simply about having power. If the definition of racism, or if being a racist requires that you need to have some form of power, then the AWB was not a racist organization, because the AWB had zero power. The only power they had was taking up guns and shooting people. But
it's one attribute, she's saying.
Well, it could be one attribute. I agree with that. I just don't think that it's a prerequisite to being racist.
Do you want to respond?
It's absolutely a prerequisite to being racist. Because if you don't have any power that you can exert on somebody, then how do you diminish them? How do you demoralize them? How do you kill them? The AWB had the power of a state a state that gave them priority because of their race, a state that allowed them certain freedoms that it didn't allow the people that they were oppressing because of their race. So they had a lot of power. They may not have been the main holders of that power, but they were beneficiaries of power. That's what we call white privilege.
Eugene ter Blanche was arrested by the state and thrown in prison.
But he still was part of a system that was saying to him, because you're white, we're giving you liberties that we're not giving other people.
But that's what's happening currently with regard to black people.
In what way?
In many ways.
In what way?
Well, for example, there was an advertisement recently by the Department of Health, I think, in KwaZulu-Natal, who said they want to appoint 100 people, but white people should not apply.
Yes, that's absolutely...
Is that a good thing?
It's absolutely right. Because we live in a society already that preferences white people and still does today.
That sounds like black preferential treatment.
No, it's not black preferential treatment.
Yeah.
It's trying
Blacks
to balance
only
out,
is not black
it's balancing
preferential
out
treatment.
power.
Here's what's interesting
it's balancing
to
out
me.
power.
Here's what's interesting to me about the engagement. And one of my aspirations for this engagement tonight was not to have a similar conversation that we've had before in our country, which pivot around the same points, where there is just my point of view, your point of view, but there's no meeting in the middle. How do you evolve, and I'll put this question to the both of you before we go to break, how do you evolve your perspective, which is singular and dogmatic and seems to have not been changed? I mean, even, if we consider the recent trips that you guys have been on as AfriForum across the world to beat the drum of white genocide.
No. That's not true.
We have records.
The press ombudsman has ruled repeatedly against media institutions
Facebook postings.
Who said this thing.
Okay, I'm saying the term. Are you saying you've never employed the term white genocide?
No, we have actively campaigned against people claiming that there's a genocide.
There are Facebook. Okay, I'll park that for now. But there are Facebook
and the
postings.
press ombudsman has ruled in our favour.
I'm just going to go back to Facebook postings from 2010, 2013, and 2017. The references I can show you, but I don't want us to get stuck in that. What I'm saying is, if we're stuck in our own ideology, how are we ever expected to move to a place that is different? Ultimately, you would argue that you have justice at the core of your cause. Am I correct?
Well, our cause is we don't want farmers to get murdered.
Only farm workers? Farmers, I mean?
No. We want farm murders to stop. That includes farm workers.
Yeah, but there is no, again, on the definition, and that's why I'm saying, if we get stuck in our dogma, we're not going to be able to move to a place where we can have understanding. There has been endless research on the phenomenon of farm workers, on the phenomenon of farm murders. It's been documented by people like Africa Check. You can go and have a look on their website, which debunk that idea, because there is no such definition of it in terms of the way crime stats are put together. And we can go on about that. But what I'm trying to say is there a place where you can evolve your own perspective to include the challenge to that notion, to where your dogma can be widened or even suspended?
Well, I would say the answer to that is we take a very strong stance of being consistent, and we actively and repeatedly condemn, for example, white racism. You would see many AfriForum press statements condemning white racists. The problem that we have is we are frequently in debate with people or organizations who have a one-dimensional view, who only believe that one group can be racist. And now we need to find some sort of a compromise. So this group is saying only you can be racist, and we are saying, okay, both of us can be racist.
What's your best hope, do you think, then, for us to get over this? Not get over it in the sense of getting over what the history means and the reality of the inequality that we still exist in South Africa today, but a way to really see each other. Do you think that opportunity exists?
Yes. And
how does it?
Maybe the answer to your question is a bigger picture answer, not necessarily with regard to racism, but I think it would correlate to the issue of racism. I think the biggest thing that needs to be done is we need to break the entitlement ideology. People believe
do you want to respond on the entitlement issue? I'm really actually
glad that entitlement is the last thing that you said. You cannot tell, especially young black South Africans, that they are entitled when they live in poverty, when they live in degradation, when they're living and this is not just the 24 years history that they are inheriting. They are inheriting hundreds and hundreds of years of history and oppression. And the fact that the ANC government has not done what it needs to do in the last 24 years does not make that history irrelevant. And most importantly, you cannot say to me, I'm entitled, when what has happened is I was told I am entitled to be free, I'm entitled to be educated, and I'm entitled to have a good quality of life. If that's entitlement, sure, I'm entitled.
Next, my jury weighs in. This is Madam Speaker.